Welcome to the Find Your Best Future podcast. This is the podcast that helps international families make great decisions when it comes to choosing university courses. So welcome to another episode. Today we're meeting Liam Ryan. He's from the University of Limerick in Ireland. Jeremy, what are you hoping to find out today?
Well, I'm particularly interested in Ireland as a destination because I sent one of my sons to study there. He didn't actually go to Limerick, but I'm really curious to find out what Limerick has to offer. I had a quick glance at the website before we started this podcast, and I must say I was very impressed with what I read.
Great. So let's take a look. Let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Neil. So my name is Liam Ryan. I'm the International Officer here in the University of Limerick. I'm actually a graduate of UL, so studied politics and international relations and worked in industry for about 10 years. And I've been back in my alma mater, University of Limerick, for the last 5.
Fantastic. And give us a quick introduction to your university.
So the University of Limerick is a public government university in the Republic of Ireland. So it's a large university of about 20,000 students. It covers all major faculties and is ranked in the top 500 universities in the world.
Right. And what do you love most about your university?
What I love most about my university is the sense of community. The university prioritizes student experience, and it prioritizes kind of the environment of nurturing students. So it's a really practical, fun education that students get. So they focus on student experience and employability, and I absolutely love that approach towards education.
But tell us about Limerick and the university and the campus. Give us a picture of where you work and where you live.
Yeah, so the university is in the suburbs of Limerick City. So Limerick is the third largest city in Ireland, just after Dublin and Cork. The campus itself then is a large parkland campus, so it's about 233 hectares in an old colonial manor garden, basically. So it's like walking around if you're into Bridgerton or some of those old type things. So it's really, really beautiful kind of gardens, but then really modern facilities built within that as well. So the campus environment is it's an award-winning campus. So in Ireland, we consistently win best campus of the year. It straddles the River Shannon, so there's a bridge basically that goes across the river where you can walk out and experience a bit of nature while in the middle of the river, but also then the campus is surrounded by a suburb on the Limerick side, and then on the other side of the river is in quite a rural area, so surrounded by farms and forestry and stuff like that as well. So a little bit of everything, but it's a beautiful kind of parkland suburban campus just outside the city, so about 2 kilometers outside the city centre.
Fantastic. And transport connections to the airport? How far away? How does that work?
Yeah, so our nearest international airport is Shannon Airport, so it's about 20 minutes away, and there's a regular bus service there. We also have a bus service every hour from the campus to Dublin Airport, which is kind of a larger hub, and that travels all around Europe, travels to Dubai, travels to the US, and all over the world. And then there's actually a bus station in the university campus. So just outside the student centre, we have a national bus station, which has links kind of going all around the country. And then there's a link basically every 15 minutes into the city centre by bus as well. So most of the transport, by public transport anyway, is by bus. Yeah,
fantastic. But pretty well connected.
Yeah, we're lucky. We do try and kind of, we understand it, particularly for our international students. Many of them aren't driving, so we do try and make it as easy as possible for students to get around. There's kind of like buses that travel around the local area then as well. So it's kind of a lot of the students either live on campus in student university dorms or live just off campus in residential areas. So there's kind of circular bus routes that go around the suburb called Castletroy as well. Yeah.
And, one of the big questions is the weather, of course. Ireland has a reputation of being even wetter than Vancouver, where I'm currently located. What's it like, though, really? What's it like nowadays? Obviously, weather's changing, and over the last 10 years, I guess it may have may have changed in Limerick too.
We have a saying: "There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad preparation or bad clothing." So
they have that saying in Vancouver as well.
Yeah,
they're lying.
So sometimes they are. So it's quite good. So what I would say is that the weather basically is quite temperate. So there's no extremes. It doesn't get extremely hot. It doesn't get extremely cold. So we get a couple of days of snow kind of around January, February time per year. We don't go really above 30 degrees Celsius in the summer. So it's kind of it's nice and pleasant the whole year round. It does have a tendency to rain quite regularly, or have four seasons in one day. So we've had days where it's hailstones, then sun, then windy, then rain. So it's just really about bringing the right kind of waterproof rain jacket and the right gear and stuff like that, and people just kind of get on with it. But no, I mean, I personally love the weather. I cover Southeast Asia as my kind of main region, and traveling over there, you step outside the door and whatever clothes you're wearing instantly turn to sweat patches. So in Ireland that doesn't happen. It's a bit more temperate, but yeah, very very pleasant, nice and kind of temperate. So it doesn't get too extremely hot or too extremely cold.
Right. And you mentioned it's a government university, yeah, and that means not for profit, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. So we're basically owned by the Irish Department of Education. So the policy in Ireland is for education to be subsidised or free of charge, basically for domestic students, but also it's not for profit on behalf of international students as well. So we're run not for profit.
Okay, and for international students as well.
Yeah,
right.
So it's essentially the costs are subsidised quite significantly for domestic students, and then it's basically education at cost for international.
Right, and we'll get to that later. Okay, so we've got an idea of the location. Let's zoom in on the facilities bit by bit. Maybe talk about the libraries, the teaching spaces, kind of things people can expect. Obviously, sport facilities. Maybe arts and performances. Just give us a picture of what kind of facilities the students can expect if they were to come to you.
Yeah, so as I kind of mentioned at the start, one of the big kind of focuses of the university and where a lot of the resource goes is in student experience. So as you can imagine, we have a big focus on facilities. So our teaching facilities, we have 4 main faculties. So science and engineering, business, arts, humanities and social sciences, and then education and health science. And each of those obviously have a dedicated kind of building assigned to those individual areas. We have over, I think, 38,000 square feet of laboratories and kind of and areas in that area, kind of to be used for practical type work. There's a whole variety of different spaces. So, you know, whether you're doing education, we have kind of the approach essentially is to replicate the workplace as closely as possible, okay, and to teach kind of teach in that sort of area. So for our teaching education, for example, we have simulated classrooms. For our aeronautical engineering, we have a flight simulator. We have a jet engine lab. We have a wind tunnel and so on. So depending on what course you're studying, I mean, we have so many that I can't individually call out specific facilities.
Sure, of course.
Usually there is kind of a very practical element to your education, and it's something that it's not kind of sitting in a classroom learning theory. You're usually taking the application of the theory and putting it into practice on campus.
The sports facilities, what have you got in those terms?
Yeah, so sports facilities, we're actually known as Ireland's sporting campus. So we have our national Olympic swim team train on campus. We have a number of Olympic athletes that train on campus. We have Munster Rugby. I don't know if either of you guys are rugby fans, but
sure.
the Munster Rugby Academy, their centre of excellence essentially is based on campus here. In terms of facilities for students, we have a couple of gyms that are free of charge for students that live on campus. We have an Olympic swimming pool, Olympic diving pool. We have a world-class climbing wall. We have a rowing. So as I said, we're on the river basically, but we have a rowing club basically that based itself on the river Shannon. We have an activity centre. We have an equine science, so like a horse stud. There's a whole host of stuff. There's a lot there. So we have I'm the coach of the American football club within the university. So I'm that's my main passion. So I've been coaching those guys for playing or coaching with them for the last 20 years. So we have, believe it or not, we have an American football team here in Limerick in Ireland as well.
I did not believe that would be possible, to be honest. It sounds rather sacrilegious.
It is. Yeah, we get some weird looks. We get some weird looks. People playing Gaelic games is our biggest sport over here. But rugby is kind of a religion in Limerick at the moment with Munster and stuff like that. So
sure, exactly.
But no, it's good. It's good fun. But there's a whole host of different things depending on what kind of interest you're in. So if you're interested in badminton to archery to any type of sport, there's usually something available for them.
Fantastic. And arts, art facilities, theatre.
Yeah, so one of our faculties, we have a faculty of Arts, Humanities and Social Science, and within that there is a School of Music and Dance, so it's the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance. So that initially started as a way to study traditional Irish music, so folk music, folk dance and so on, but it's evolved over time basically into a very, very strong performing arts school in itself. And we have students that come in and learn classical music. We have students that come in and kind of focus on, there's a big focus on kind of regional music or dance that isn't maybe represented in third level. So we have Ethiopian drummers, we have Ghanaian percussion instrument players, we have people from all over the world essentially. So a Javanese gamelan from Indonesia, a wide range of stuff basically. But it's evolved now into a place where you can study music and performance at third level. Often in places where they don't offer like a specific course in that. It's kind of set up where you come in with your own performance ability, and you just learn the kind of the performance techniques and stuff like that, and you kind of apply that to your own specialist area or specialist instrument.
Sounds really cool.
Yeah,
big facility. Shopping, eating. How does that? Is it in the town, or is there any opportunities to go and buy stuff on the campus?
Yeah, so we have, my last count, we have 19 restaurants, cafes and restaurants. So pretty much every building on campus has a cafe or a restaurant, a kind of a social area where students can meet and chat. We have, the big brand ones like Starbucks and Costa Coffee and things like that. But we also then have kind of more local ones. We have 5 bars on campus, which probably isn't too common, I think, in some
We'll come
other,
to that later. We'll come to having fun later.
And then there's obviously a couple of shops and stuff like that. So we have about 3,000 students live on campus. So there's a large supermarket in the campus environment, and then we have a couple of malls within kind of walking distance from the campus as well. So It's because it's such a big population. It kind of attracts basically shops just off the campus in the local surrounds as well. So sure. A lot of the students will shop or kind of eat Monday to Friday, will stay on campus, and then maybe pop into the city on a Saturday to do some more specific shopping, or if they want to buy clothes or whatever, that usually sure. happens in the city. But you'd go in for a trip for that.
Understood. Tell us a bit about your staff. Where do they come from? The lecturers. What kind of people will be teaching undergraduate students?
Yeah, so we have an academic staff of 2,000. So they're essentially from all over the world. I think 100 nationalities across the staff. We have obviously a fairly high proportion of those would be Irish professors, lecturers, and tutors. One of the good things, obviously, is they're all native English speakers. So the language on campus, the language in all the teaching and all that sort of stuff is through English. So a lot of the kind of international students are looking for that, native English speaking teaching, which is great. But we do also then have lots of faculty from every corner of the world, and they would teach kind of across the board. We do often get so postgraduate students, so senior master students or PhD students would kind of act as what we call tutors. So they would kind of manage a smaller cohort, so 5 or 6 students. They would kind of do one-to-one tutoring or stuff like that with them, and then professors essentially would kind of manage some of the larger classes in terms of giving across more detailed information on specific topics. So it's a
Right.
mixture of kind of senior professors and then lecturers, tutors, and then postgraduate students that would be teaching our undergrad cohort.
Understood. And the students?
Students, again, so last year we had 3,000 international students, and I think there was 75 nationalities in that group. We get a lot of students, obviously, through exchange programs, through the Erasmus program with Europe. So we have about 1,000 students from across Europe that come in for a semester or for a year. And we would send out Irish students that would go out onto those exchange programs. We also get about 700 or 800 students a year from the USA, so on kind of study abroad or single semester exchange type programs as well. And then quite a number of students then from India, from China, from Nigeria, Canada. We get a lot of students into our medical school. And then obviously the different regions like so Vietnam, Indonesia, and things like that across the Middle East, pretty much all over the world. So there's quite a diverse student campus basically. That it's not just all Irish students. About 16,000 Irish students and about 3,000 international students.
Okay. Students are often pretty obsessed with rankings, and high school kids spend a lot of time, as Jeremy knows, looking at the ranking sites, trying to work out what's the perfect mixture of position on the rankings and price point and location. It's become a science for grade 11 students. Really. And you know, we know that rankings aren't everything, but it's important for many people. How does your university rank in maybe in national terms and international terms?
Yeah, so we're ranked in the QS, Times Higher Education, Shanghai, all of the kind of the major ones.
Sure.
We do quite well on the kind of individual areas. So we have 5-star rankings in QS, for example, for every single category. We're usually between kind of top 500 or top 600 across the major ranking areas. So I understand it's kind of the only way to kind of compare universities, and it's an easily compared stat. But what I would say is that there is a lot of other factors around that. So things like, fit of the program, fit of the campus, fit of the environment, economic factors as well. But also kind of, is the university going to give you a positive experience as well? So it's a big investment. It's as they say, the best years of your life. You want to spend that in the right destination as well. So we do obviously we work quite a bit on making sure that we're recognized by rankings, but there is obviously a skew for those for older universities that are cited in research papers more often. That doesn't necessarily mean that an undergraduate student is going to get a better experience there.
I guess the reason why we're doing the podcast really is to highlight the fact that it is all about the right fit. And Jeremy spends a lot of time in our podcast talking about the right fit, because in the end, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Exactly, and it's something that we as an international team, we put a lot of emphasis on that. So making sure that not to treat students, I suppose, as a number to try and get into the university. It's actually counselling them effectively to say, this is the course that you're intending to study. These are the outcomes. These are the potential employment opportunities for you afterwards. Do those match with your goals? And if they don't match with your goals, it's not the right fit, and it's not the program for you. Like trying to ask the student what their passions are, what their interests are, and trying to kind of drag that out of them and bring that out to the fore, as opposed to, you've been told that you should be an accountant, or you've been told you should be a doctor. That doesn't lead to any passion. It doesn't lead to any enjoyment. If you enjoy your job, you'll never work a day in your life, and that's something I try and bring to all of my conversations with students and parents, for sure.
Yeah, it's something that music to our ears, Liam, in many ways, because we spend our time dealing in that world of sort of expectations and sort of hopes and then private dreams, and trying to bring out the person that is inside each student is the real key, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I've had I don't know how many times I've had that conversation, but the conversation I usually explain to parents is their kid is going to be more successful if they're doing something they enjoy and they're passionate about, rather than something that you think there might be a job for in the next 5 years. It's very hard to predict employment patterns for 5 years in the future. Everyone's saying data science. Yeah, even that. Everyone's saying data science is the next big thing, and that probably is going to be the case. But it's impossible to predict what happens. If something happens and changes what the next hot topic is, then it's something that the student is then left with. Probably not the best outcome for themselves. So it's a strength of the university. We try and kind of make sure that we're giving students honest appraisals of the course. We have a policy of making sure that the students get a student-led feedback on the program. So we have an app called Campus Connect, where students can basically speak to current students on the course and ask them, without me looking over their shoulder going, you have to say the right answer. What's the course like? What are you studying? What's the outcome like? And have that kind of interaction between prospective students and current students, so that they're not getting a filtered or an abridged version of what the student experience is like.
Liam, you mentioned in your introduction that your university offers a broad range of courses in different fields. Are there any courses which you find are particularly popular with international students?
Yeah, so we do have a wide range of programs, and the most popular courses I think would be probably the Bachelor of Business Studies is often quite a popular one. We have a Bachelor of Computer Science. We have a Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, which is kind of the US style graduate type program. And then we also have more specific courses and things like that. One of the things that are the way that we tailor our bachelor degree courses is that we offer what are called common entry programs. So our Bachelor of Business Studies, essentially, it's a single entry point into our business school. The students do business related subjects in year one. And then after that year, they can then stream into accountancy, finance, marketing, human resources, risk management, project management, data management, and so on. So there's a kind of a couple of courses there. We limit the amount of programs that students can select in year one. They try essentially before they buy their major then within that area. But the most popular would really be computer science and business, probably are our two most common programs.
I assume then the courses are 3-year bachelor degrees or standard 3-year programs in most cases.
We're unusual, actually. So we offer a 4-year bachelor's, but within that is an 8-month paid internship to all students, and it's organized by the university, supervised by the university, and it's built into their program basically. So we have a number of industry partners that essentially guarantee placements to UL students. We would basically set them up per major. So the students essentially are on campus for 3 years. They do a 1-year placement that's kind of facilitated and supervised by the university, and then they graduate in 4 years. But it's a 4-year honours bachelor's degree with an 8-month paid internship built into it.
I see. And do the students work in Ireland, or do they go abroad for these internships?
About 25% do their internships abroad. Oftentimes, if they're international students, they may prefer to do their internship at home and work in a company kind of in their home country. Some may do their internships in a company that's specific to their interests. So we have a placement program with Lufthansa in Germany, for example, where it's kind of a more tailored placement. But a lot of our students do their placements in multinational companies actually in Ireland. So we have placements with Google, with Facebook, with Apple, Microsoft, across the board in computer science, in areas like financial services and other areas. Biomedical sciences is another big, strong area for multinationals in Ireland as well. But a lot of the students will do their placements in Irish-based multinational companies.
I mean, you mentioned sort of medical science programs. In some countries, the local government place restrictions on the number of international students who are allowed to study a particular subject. Medicine is probably a good example. Is there a restriction in the Irish Republic on numbers of international students who can study medicine?
Yeah, the two programs that we have kind of restrictions for numbers would be Bachelor of Medicine and then our Bachelor of Nursing. So we can take international students into those programs, but the placements into hospitals and into clinical placement areas are kind of limited by a total capped number. So as a result, basically there is a certain number of places within those two courses that are kind of ring fenced for international students. We can't normally go above that number each year, but there's still access into those programs, but it's not unlimited access, basically.
Yeah, I see. We were talking just now about placements or internships. Do your students go on exchanges to foreign universities?
Yes, so we in our Faculty of Humanities we have a compulsory overseas semester, so one full semester overseas. In most of our business school programs as well, there is a compulsory semester overseas that's arranged, and then we do have an optional exchange program for our science and engineering and some of our education health science. It can be a little bit more difficult with those programs because they're kind of accredited by specific nursing bodies or engineering bodies, and the accreditations can run into slight difficulties, but we do offer a huge range of exchange programs. So I mentioned obviously in the intro, I'm a UL graduate. So I studied politics and international relations. And during my time, basically, I did a semester in SUNY New York, so State University of New York, in New Paltz. It was just after kind of the 9/11 attacks, essentially, and I went over and studied international relations and kind of Middle East politics in New York. And it actually was really interesting to kind of get different viewpoints. You know, you would get a certain viewpoint in Europe and in Ireland, but actually to go over to New York and get a much more kind of people had relatives who'd been involved. The lecturer was a former presidential advisor to the Nixon administration, I think, and stuff like that. So there was kind of a real interesting and different viewpoint. So some exchange is definitely something that we promote across the whole university. It's compulsory in our two faculties, and then optional in the others.
Many students ask me about the teaching style at a university. They sort of say to me, is this going to be, am I going to be sitting in a lecture room and just being talked at by a lecturer, or will I be doing a more sort of problem-based learning? Which is the preferred style at Limerick University, or does it vary from one department to another?
So there's kind of a general rule, and then it does how the mix kind of changes slightly from school to school, essentially. But the general rule is that we have 3 types of classes. So every course essentially will have a mixture of lectures. So you'll have a lecture from a professor on a specific topic. Normally you'll be about an hour in duration and will cover the topic in detail. You'll then have what's called a tutorial. So it will be normally a smaller class size, so 5 or 6 students with either that same professor or a teacher from the teaching staff. They'll discuss the topic of the lecture that's been put in place. We'll go through it in more detail. There'll be much more interactive type sessions, so kind of a chance to ask questions, discuss, and present in groups and so on. And then there usually is what we call labs, but essentially they're practical applications of the learning. So we have labs across all courses. It's not just the white gowns and glasses and working with chemicals. So labs can be anything from, so our civil engineering program, for example, they have a lab in first year where they have to build a bridge out of wood over one of the lakes or kind of fountains basically on campus. And the final exam is the professor has to walk across the bridge that you built. So if the professor gets wet, you fail the module basically.
Well, it's almost worth tempting, isn't it, to fail the module just to see it go in.
Yeah.
Well, that's a wonderful entree to the next question, because I was about to ask you, how do you assess students' progress and achievement? But it looks like you've just answered that question.
So there's quite a bit of ongoing assessment. So it's not something that it's all just a sit down exam at the end of semester. We do have exam weeks at the end of each semester, and normally it will make up a proportion of your grade. But there is usually continuous assessment throughout the semester. So, for example, in my politics degree, we would have had kind of in week one, we would have been given deadlines for a selection of essays. You would basically have picked your titles and submitted the essays within those deadlines. That would have made up probably 50% of your grade, and then the final exam would have made 50% of your grade. In more kind of hands-on courses like biomedicine or something like that, the lab work obviously would make up a significant proportion of your grade work as well.
What happens if a student fails a course? Do they have the opportunity to retake the course or repeat a year at the university, for example?
Yeah, so we have an end of summer repeat. So students can basically, if they fail a module during the year, we call subjects modules. If they fail a module basically during the year, they can choose to retake that at the end of the summer. So we do get some students that do that option. If they fail the repeat, they then have to repeat the year, but they can opt to do that as well. But we do quite a bit of support work in terms of trying to identify issues early. So because we have continuous assessment, it's quite easy to see if somebody's way off the mark on the first couple of assignments, and we'll often point them towards some of the learning centers that we have on campus. But yeah, you can repeat a single failure. So you don't have to kind of go off track and repeat a full year. So you can actually catch up at the end of the summer. It does mean your summer is a little bit more depressing. But if you had worked harder during semester, maybe you wouldn't have had to waste your summer studying. But the option is there as well. Yeah. So we have kind of fairly fair repeatable options for students who fail.
Now, moving on a little bit, when you are recruiting students, you probably have an idea about the attributes of a successful or a typical Limerick University student. What sort of profile of a student are you looking for?
So I suppose because of the nature of the program and the bachelor degree programs across the board, we do have that work placement piece. We do have most of our courses, particularly in business and humanities, have an exchange portion as well. So we're looking for kind of practical, reasonably independent people that can kind of come in, that enjoy learning by doing. So our university motto in Gaelic Irish is Éigeanna chun gníomh, but translated to English is wisdom through action. So we're looking for kind of practical, real world, common sense type people that can come in, learn a skill, apply it to the business world, or apply it to the real world. There is probably stronger research universities. I mean, we are strong in research in some areas, but the whole ethos of the university is to kind of speak to our industry partners. Because we have such strong links with industry, we have those large placement programs. We're speaking to them every year, every semester. What's happening in the real world? What do we need to teach our first and second years so that they can have a successful placement in third year? So there's kind of a continuous feedback loop there from industry. The people that succeed and do well are people that want to get into the real world as quickly as possible and want to understand what working life is like. So they're kind of the graduates that are most sought after for us and are most likely to be successful. Somebody who's just wants to sit in the library and learn the theory will probably do okay, but will struggle definitely during the placement year and during the exchange program as well.
Is there a former student who comes to mind whose story would serve as an inspiration to those listeners who are considering applying?
Yeah, so I've got a good few. So I always love meeting my international student graduates. But there is so Nhi Nguyen. She's an international student from Vietnam. So she kind of had set up her own travel company, and was doing okay in Vietnam basically, but wanted to kind of see what she could do outside of the kind of confines of Vietnam. So she came and studied our international tourism program, and basically has graduated and is now working as kind of the region manager for Southeast Asia for Pinterest. So a very famous kind of a tech multinational essentially. So she's based here in Ireland, working for Pinterest, and is loving life, living actually in a smaller town, so not living in Dublin, which is unusual for some graduates, but likes the smaller town, likes the countryside, likes the kind of the pace of life outside the large cities as well. So she was really practical, really hands-on, had that kind of entrepreneurial experience or kind of business experience, came in and just thrived, got a first class honours, and is now working in a big multinational in a very successful role as well. So if everyone could be like me, my life would be a lot easier.
Sounds like an inspiration to all of us, I think. Being
She's
that flexible
amazing.
And determined.
She participated in our we have a global ambassador program as well. So she was one of our really strong ambassadors. If I click onto the website for the UL page, I see Nee in a UL t-shirt. So she's a real kind of a passionate advocate for UL as well.
I was on your website earlier on today. I think that possibly was the young lady I saw, but well, anyway. There is, of course, a question which I get asked regularly by every student that walks through the door of my office here in school, like, what are the entry requirements for a particular university? Could you maybe speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the way that we kind of manage our admission is it's quite transparent, it's quite open. So we have whatever system essentially the student is applying for. So if they're IB or A levels or whatever kind of approach they're doing for undergraduate entry, essentially we have a minimum threshold for admission. The student would basically submit their predicted grades or their final grades, depending on the time of applying. And as long as their predicted grades or final grades are above our minimum threshold, essentially we'll offer them a place. They have a window to accept that offer. So we basically have X number of places on a program. So if it's 10 places, the first 10 students that we'll offer will give them an acceptance deadline. If the student misses that acceptance deadline, then the place goes back into circulation and we can offer that back out. Some students miss the acceptance deadline. They still come back to us and say, can I still accept? If there is still a place there, then they can come back in. But we're very, very open to say, if you're applying for an IB school and you're applying for, one of our Bachelor of Business programs, an average score of 30 or above will get you admission, and there's no kind of ambiguity essentially in it. It's quite transparent. There's no long essay submission or extracurriculars or volunteering or anything like that. We try and make it as fair as possible. Essentially, it's based specifically on the academic requirements.
And I presume you're talking about applying through CAO here.
So for European, so if you're based in Europe, so if you're studying in Europe, your parents or yourself are tax resident essentially in Europe, you apply through CAO. If you are an international student, so studying outside the European Union, then you would apply directly to the international office, and the admission decision is done by ourselves here in the international team. So the benefit of that, it's much quicker. So essentially, we turn your application around. We can give you an offer within a week of applying. The CEO, essentially, it all goes into the central admissions office in Ireland. And then the offer is made kind of towards the end of the cycle in August. So for any European students listening, apply through CAO. For any non-European based students, so you can have an Irish passport, but if you're studying from Vancouver or Kuala Lumpur, you apply directly to the university through the international team.
So let's talk about support services. I mean, these are obviously very important for students, and they typically fall into two areas. There's the academic support, and then there's support, social emotional support, for example. Perhaps we could begin by talking about what academic support is offered to students at Limerick University.
Yeah, so we have a couple of different academic supports in place. So one of the things, as I mentioned, is the kind of the different types of classes that are in place. There is quite a hands-on team in terms of your actual teaching team. There is ongoing assessment and smaller class sizes, so you can kind of have there's a culture essentially of going to your professor or going to your lecturer and asking questions and asking for clarification. All of our professors have open office hours essentially, so they have a drop-in service where you can go in and speak to them and get immediate feedback. That's kind of the first port of call. Oftentimes then, if there's a specific requirement for teaching in terms of, it could be maths, science, computer skills, English language, if they're not native English language speakers. And we have basically learning centers that are free of charge for students for access into those, basically. So they would be kind of more specific teaching centers where you can get, one-to-one tutoring on a specific topic. So if you're doing applied physics and you're studying with the mathematics part of it, the math center essentially would be a drop-in center where you can get extra tutoring on that. Each of our faculties then also have an academic support officer. So they would basically act as kind of a liaison between the faculty teams, the support kind of the support centers and the student. So a student can go speak to the academic liaison officer and essentially kind of get a bespoke plan put in place for them. So that's kind of the support structure. It functions quite well. There is that kind of early warning system, as we call it, of the ongoing assessment. So if a student is really, really struggling at the start of the semester, we can kind of get ahead of that and try and help the student at the start of the semester rather than waiting for the final exam. They fail that, and then you're trying to do the remedial stuff in the next piece. So that's kind of the structure we have for academic supports.
And of course, the other area of concern for many students is the whole social emotional side, because they recognize they're going to be going away from home, and some of them are a little anxious about this. Can you tell us what you do to support students who are perhaps struggling a little bit sort of emotionally?
Yeah, so I mean, and it's obviously been hugely stressful for students over the last couple of years in particular. I think we've been very much aware of that. We do put as I said, a lot of work into the student experience piece. One of our proudest kind of rankings or things that we've been rated on is a thing called the Student Eye Barometer. So it's essentially a survey of international students from all over the world. I think last year there was 90,000 students surveyed. So they're current international students in universities all over the world. So instead of a ranking about research citations and stuff like that, actually, what's it like to study in that university? We were ranked number 1 in the world for international student happiness. So actually the quality of life in terms of the kind of effort and support that's put in, that for us is probably the thing that we're most proud of. So we put so much effort into it that to actually get feedback from the students positively on that was great. In terms of specifics, so we have a counselling centre, we have a medical centre, we have a dedicated international global team, so have student support team in that area. We have a visa support team. So they help students with kind of getting their student visas and right to work and so on. We have a disability service, we have access services, we have whole range of services that are made available to students. But I think one of the big things you'll find basically is a lot of the staff in UL are UL alumni, and we've studied abroad basically because it's compulsory in the university. So I've been that student sitting in New Paltz in New York going, I don't know how to find a shop, I don't know how to get to my class, I don't know what to do. Where do I find my schedule? What do I do in that instance? So the big thing that we see, I think that differentiates us from a lot of universities is actually 90% of the staff probably have done some sort of a study abroad experience as part of their bachelor. They understand how stressful and how anxious you can be. So the compassion and actually the approach is put yourself in that person's shoes and go, what information does that person need? When do they need it, and get it to them kind of in a timely and efficient manner is kind of the approach that we take. So there is loads of services, and I think lots of universities offer them, but actually I think we don't just pay it lip service. Essentially, we kind of try and put ourselves in the shoes of the student and say, okay, this would be really helpful because if I was going to New Paltz and I got that, it would have made my life a lot easier and so on. So that's one of the approaches we take.
It sounds as if you created a very nice environment with a lovely campus and excellent support services for students. And you mentioned just now that you have a health centre. While we're on that topic, do students have to take out health insurance when they come to study in Ireland?
Yeah, so one of the requirements for getting a student visa essentially is to take out a a kind of a health insurance policy. I think it cost, the last I looked at it, it was about €166 or something like that. So it essentially covers you for a year. It covers kind of any serious illnesses or repatriation costs and stuff like that. But actually, the health service in Ireland is public as well. So there's not kind of many private healthcare services here. A lot of the kind of health services are provided free of charge, or you pay a small fee for access. But if you break your arm, you pay a kind of an A&E fee of about €60. But actually, the cast and all the kind of healthcare after you access the service essentially is free of charge. So the health insurance piece is definitely a requirement, but actually to access the health service here in Ireland is it's not quite as good as the NHS, but it's not far off the NHS in the UK.
Okay, so to move away from that topic, you were talking earlier on about the excellent sports facilities that you have at Limerick. Could you maybe mention what you do in terms of art, music, that type of creative side?
Yeah, so a lot of the activities on campus are arranged through what we call our clubs and societies. So we have a number of professional officers within the university whose role is to facilitate clubs and societies. So I think at the last count, we have 90 across the university. They're funded by the university, but they're kind of student led. So we have a very active music society. They would have everything from Irish trad music to electronic dance to rap to different kind of performances. There would be a drama society, so they do kind of fairly frequent drama performances in. We have a 1,000-seater concert hall, essentially. So they would do a lot of their performances there, or smaller kind of location based stuff as well. In terms of there's different things then in terms of level of performance. We have a craft society that kind of meet up and knit or crochet or draw, and a whole range of stuff. So I mean the kind of the kind of social participation piece in terms of artistic endeavor is facilitated through that. We do also then have kind of a high performance type artistic center as well. So the World Academy, those would usually be professional musicians essentially, or professional dancers that would be coming through the kind of cycle. Again, our practical teaching piece kicks in here. So some of their exams essentially would be to have a performance or have a concert on campus. So we have a lunchtime on a Wednesday. Basically, there's a lunchtime concert, and it's usually students who are their assessment essentially is to put together the concert, promote it, and have that performance on campus. So there's a mixture basically. So we do get some students that come and study business or computer science or whatever it is, but have an interest in music, and they do that kind of outside their class time. But we also then do get students that come in and study design, we have art and technology, we have music and dance as well. So there's kind of a mix of approaches. So if you're interested in kind of that artistic endeavor piece, definitely an option for you there, either to do it socially or to do it as part of your degree program.
It sounds like there's certainly a lot to keep students busy, both on the academic side and also the sort of the extracurricular, if you like. But what do students tend to do in the evenings and weekends? I mean, how do they do they go partying or they?
So I mean, it's really down to the interests or the passions of the student. So as I mentioned, I'm a coach for the American football team. So last night we had one of our training sessions. We had about 40 students down at that were training kind of from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. So essentially that's all the equipment is provided by the university. All the coaching and training then is voluntary. So a lot of the kind of midweek type evenings, so Monday to Thursday nights essentially would be often the club activities. So the kind of, if you're interested in gaming or sports or crafts or music or whatever, they would normally happen the midweek evenings. Usually Thursday evening and Friday evening there's an international party night. So Friday night in the Stables Club, which is kind of one of the bars on campus, they have an international party night. A lot of the Irish students go home to their home to their mammy, is what we say. So they go home and see their family and get their washing done and stuff like that. So our international students, they're still on campus. So Friday night is party night essentially for those guys, and they do different themes. So we have like a Diwali party, we have a Thanksgiving, we have all sorts of stuff there. So Friday night is usually a good one, and then a lot of our international students will work part-time during weekends, or will do kind of field trips. So they'll do a trip to Dublin, a trip to Belfast, a trip to Paris, a trip to Barcelona, wherever it might be. So pretty much any European city is less than 2 hours flight, or just around 2 hours flight from Shannon. So depending on kind of what their finances allow, they're either working part-time, or else they're jetting off somewhere, or traveling up to Dublin or Belfast or Cork or something like that.
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention the name of a very famous Irish cut-price airline, but I assume that airline serves a lot of destinations and allows students to buy cheap tickets to travel at the weekends.
Absolutely, yeah. So,
yeah.
And my surname is Ryan, so I feel like I can endorse them. But essentially, I mean, it's about €50, which is not a hugely expensive price to fly to pretty much, as long as you plan well, to fly pretty much anywhere in Europe. You can get around quite easily. So we do get a lot of our students do travel and see Europe while they're here as well. It's something that we urge them to do. It's not just about staying in Limerick. Go and explore while you're here as well.
I think it's a point worth mentioning, because students will look at a map of Europe and they'll see that Limerick is way over on the western side of Europe, and they may feel it's a little isolated, but clearly it's not, because they can fly, as you say, very easily to anywhere in Europe.
Yeah.
Moving along to the alumni network, I know that students tend not to think too much about alumni networks, because it's something that seems to lie a long way in the future for a high school student. But could you talk about your alumni network?
Yeah, so UL is actually, so we're celebrating our 50 years anniversary this year. So we have 50 years of alumni, which is great. They are quite active. So we have an alumni association and an alumni office here in the university, and they arrange different events on campus, obviously, for students to come back and meet their old classmates, but also they do networking events and stuff like that in London, in New York, in Beijing, and all around the world, in terms of meeting your fellow alumni, UL alumni that are all around the world. So Irish people have a habit of spreading our fingers into every single country all over. So if you've ever been to the States or the UK or Australia, there's basically Irish people literally all over the globe. So it's not just Singaporean students who came to UL, studied in UL and went back. There's Irish students that have studied in Limerick and have got jobs in Singapore or wherever, all over Canada and stuff like that. So there is quite an active alumni network. Obviously, people have that kind of passion, and you can probably hear it from me. We're proud about our university. We don't take it for granted that we studied here. So there is quite a good support structure there. There's groups on LinkedIn for the different cities and stuff like that, and we do try and help students kind of get introduced to each other as well. But it's a very good way to find employment after you graduate, but also to kind of get that support structure and network if you move to a new city.
Sounds excellent. And to move back away from the alumni, which of course come after graduation at university, back to the very beginning when students come, first year students arrive in Ireland. I've had many conversations with the students here in school, and when they've been offered places at university, they have a mixture of emotions. First of all, they're very excited. Then they get very nervous about how they're going to cope with it. Because if you imagine a student is probably away from home the first time, they get on an aeroplane, they fly to a country which they may not have previously visited. And they worry about the details, like how will I get from the airport to the campus, and how will I find my room, and little things like that. Could you talk about how you manage this whole process for the new arrivals?
Yeah, so I tell a story about this, which I think outlines some of the approach that are the kind of success that we've had with this. So I was at a Council of International Schools. So CIS is a kind of a big international school network. I was at a conference in Bangkok a couple of years back, and I went to kind of an orientation, essentially a kind of a looking at best practice and orientation. And the University of Limerick orientation schedule was like slide 3 in the presentation. Didn't know I was in the crowd, the presenter, but actually was like, this is best practice for international orientation. So I didn't learn a huge amount from the event, but it validated what we were doing. So what we do basically, we normally take all of our international students and we ask them to arrive to campus a week early. So we put together essentially a bespoke international orientation program for all of our students. They're usually met at the airport, obviously depending on when they arrive. We don't run a collection service if somebody arrives 2 months late, but there is a collection service within certain windows. They're basically brought from the airport in Shannon or Dublin to the campus and brought to their campus accommodation. There's a team basically then, what we call an onboarding team. So they help with kind of finding their rooms, going into their apartments and stuff like that. We do everything from bringing them to the local kind of shopping center or the mall close by. So we do a bus to the mall in the first couple of days. We have a welcome pack with just the basics, so bedding and a small bit of food and stuff like that at the start. And then we basically take them from, so the first day, everyone's jet lagged, everyone's kind of stressed out, and everyone kind of doesn't really know where they're supposed to be. So we literally do an exercise class, we do an icebreaker, and we do kind of just general kind of fun stuff, essentially. So there's no big, long 8-hour lecture on how to be a student in the university. It's essentially kind of a fun day. They come in and get to know each other. They figure out where they're supposed to go. We do campus tours and stuff like that. Day 2, it starts to get a little bit more detailed. So we do kind of an academics introduction. We do a session on visas. We do a session on kind of understanding the university and so on. So there's usually kind of maybe 2 or 3 hours that day. The third day, it goes up a little bit more. There's a couple of more sessions around student life, the support services that are on offer. And then we have a formal kind of orientation. So our director of international services and our president or vice president or something like that will address the kind of full international cohort. And then we put on a big Irish dance and music concert for them at the end of that. So we kind of lure them in with the Irish dance, and then we have the formal bit at the start. But essentially then so they then go out and can do more kind of social stuff, and they do their course specific orientation on the Thursday and Friday. So if they're doing Bachelor of Business, they'll meet with their classmates and their faculty members on the Thursday. And then they start then the following Monday. So there's quite a detailed orientation. Again, we kind of put our old exchange student hats on, and we're like, if we could draw the perfect week to understand what you need to do, what would it look like? And we've kind of put that in over the last couple of years, but it's quite a good orientation. We've had very positive feedback on it. It's not all crammed into one day, basically, where students are kind of sleeping in the lecture theatre because they're just off a flight or something like that. So usually students arrive in on Thursday, Friday, the week before. They have some stuff happening on the weekend, kind of for social stuff, and then it's a full week of orientation from that point. But if they're still kind of unsettled, or they don't know what's happening, we have a drop-in service essentially then. So we have a global office or global lounge where students can just pop in and ask questions there as well. So that's kind of a service we offer throughout the year then as well.
So tell us a bit about accommodation in Limerick and at the university.
Yeah, so we have we're lucky enough to have quite a large campus, and we have a fairly good supply of on-campus accommodation. So we have 8 student villages. Basically, every student gets their own private bedroom. So double bed, study area, a bathroom for most rooms, and then kind of some storage space. So you have your own kind of private area, private room. It's usually locked. It's kind of like a hotel key card style entry. So you can only get into your room. Only you and your housemates can get into your apartment, and then only people in your kind of block can get into your block. So usually the bedrooms then are the apartments are either 2, 4, or 6 student apartments. So if you're in an apartment, essentially there would be 6 bedrooms in a corridor, and then you'd have kind of a common area, so a kitchen, and a TV room or a living room then that would be shared with 2, 4, or 6 students. So that's kind of the general, the usual kind of accommodation that's used by students. All of your bills are included in that. So heating, electricity, refuse, Wi-Fi, all that sort of stuff is all kind of built in, and gym membership. So that's kind of the most common for our international students, and particularly for first-year undergraduates, we give them priority booking for that.
Are they guaranteed a space?
It's not guaranteed, but essentially the timing of the admission for international students, they usually are applying early in the cycle. So if you apply, the accommodation essentially opens in February. Most of our international students will have an offer by that stage. So they get they book the accommodation, and then what happens is it's late cycle CAO students then go into kind of a lottery type system. So why we don't guarantee it, just because we don't know how many students are going to apply. Pretty much every international student that opts in for on-campus accommodation, if they're a first-year undergraduate, they get kind of brought basically up to the top of the list, essentially. So we do prioritize first-year undergraduates. We're lucky enough then that we're located in a suburban area, so it's kind of a residential area. I live maybe 5 minutes from campus, and it's all kind of family kind of housing kind of type estates. Some of those then are either students will live in with a family, or will have a student house, basically, so an off-campus student house that's shared with 5 or 6 students then as well.
Sure. Let's go back to the university accommodation for a moment. Mm-hmm. Is there any opportunity for gender separation? Some of our families from, let's imagine, the Middle East or more conservative backgrounds are often really interested in making sure that there's a gender separation. Does that exist at Limerick?
Yeah, so our standard accommodation is not gender separated. However, we do basically facilitate requests. So we do get we have students from all over the world, but there is obviously specific kind of requests from different groups. So we do have a certain percentage of our accommodation is gender separated, and as long as a student basically requests that, usually it can be facilitated. So yeah, it's something that we do allow and do facilitate on an ongoing basis. It's not guaranteed, so it's something just to bear that in mind. But usually it can be accommodated within reason.
And how much does it cost to stay on campus generally? I know there'll be a price span, but if you can give us an idea.
Yeah, so it's usually kind of between 4,000 and 6,000 euros per year. So that's for the academic year. That is, on campus and kind of inclusive of all bills and stuff like that. So depending on the number of bedrooms per apartment. So if you're staying in a 2-bedroom apartment, it's obviously more expensive. If you're in the most modern village, it's more expensive. If you're in the least modern village in a 6-bedroom apartment, obviously then it's towards the lower end of the scale.
Understood. And living in the town, say you've done your year and you're thinking of moving out. Is that significantly cheaper?
It's not cheaper. It's probably so the actual the monthly rent is slightly cheaper, but actually when you look at bills, so particularly in the current climate, heat and electricity, obviously those stack up. The Wi-Fi, gym membership, refuse collection, all that sort of stuff does add up. So there's probably a saving maybe of a couple of €100. So you're not gonna kind of change your budget sure. Super by living off campus. There is kind of some benefits, but it's not gonna there's not a half the amount of price or anything like that. So we do kind of if an undergraduate student is looking at on-campus accommodation. Off-campus accommodation is not going to change their financial decision. Essentially, it's kind of more for like you can live with friends and you can have there's obviously there's other benefits.
Understood. And does the university offer accommodation for visitors, or are they expected to live in the town?
Yeah, so we have a kind of visitor accommodation. So we have essentially part of one of our student villages is set up kind of like an Airbnb system. So essentially sure. You can book through the accommodation office, and there's essentially rooms to rent they're usually for visiting faculty or for parents during orientation and stuff like that. So we do have that available. We also have 2 hotels essentially walking distance from the campus. So whether it's on-campus visitor accommodation. Obviously, during orientation week, it's fully subscribed, but a lot of the students' parents will stay in one of the two hotels that are just off campus as well.
Okay, let's get to the really important stuff, food.
Yeah.
You're living on campus. It's Sunday evening. Talk to us about the food provision, how it works. Is it a package? Is there a card? Those kind of things.
So, speaking as a former student of UL, I would not recommend the prepaid package.
Okay.
There is a meal plan available, and essentially it works across all 19 restaurants across the campus. What I would say is that you're gonna spend a lot of money, and you're gonna probably put on a lot of weight if you do that all the time. So each of the dorms essentially has its own kitchen. So what we see with a lot of students is they'll either cook for themselves, or the housemates essentially will arrange kind of a cooking rota. They might cook for 3 or 4 people. There's an oven, there's a hob, there's a microwave, there's kind of everything that you need to do. So what we see is a lot of students will go to like a Costco or Lidl or Aldi or something like that, where it's kind of, reasonably priced food. You can buy kind of a bunch of stuff for the week. And then if you're on campus and you've got a busy schedule of classes and stuff like that, you can still go into all the restaurants and pay as you go, essentially. So just tap your card and pay for a plate of chips or a burger or whatever you want to eat. There's loads of options. But I personally wouldn't recommend students to get the prepaid meal plan, because then every single meal that you have to have, essentially to get value for money, you have to eat it in a restaurant, and it can speaking from experience, you can pack on a few pounds if you take that approach.
Yeah, I get it. And the restaurants on campus, are they all franchises, or are some of them provided by the university? Are they like canteens as well?
Yeah, there's a mix. So we have kind of the Subways and chopped salads and stuff like that. But there is kind of then subsidized canteens. So there's kind of provided by the university, and then there's a mix of food types. So we have a couple of places that are very good for vegetarian options. There's a couple of places that provide halal food. There's kind of a mixture then of different food options. We have there's a range of kind of price points and kind of cuisines in the different areas. It really depends on what the students kind of want to opt for. So if you like Subway, you can get that every day. McDonald's is just off campus, so those kind of franchises are there. I kind of prefer the local cuisine, but that's just maybe my own uneducated palate as well kicking in.
And finally, of course, we come on to the issue of money. There's no escaping this one. Liam, could you maybe just explain what the tuition fees are at Limerick University?
Yeah, so there's obviously a range of tuition fees for international students. It depends on the faculty and the course that you're applying for, but the general kind of range would be between 12 and 17,000 euros. So our business and humanities courses would cost around 12,000. And then our science and engineering, health science type, kind of more practical type programs would cost kind of the 17,000 range. There is obviously some slightly lower, some slightly higher. Things like medicine are significantly higher, so I think 50,000 euros per year. But that's kind of same across the board. I've not come across a cheap medical school, unfortunately. But yeah, so for general courses across the board, essentially between 12 and 17,000 euros for tuition.
And how much should a student budget for just general expenses? We sort of talked about tuition fees now, and we also talked about accommodation just now. But I mean, students obviously need a certain amount of spending money. I mean, how much money should they budget per month?
So we say for kind of an overall cost of living per year, so around 8,000 to 10,000 euros for accommodation, for food, for kind of living expenses and stuff like that. So depending on kind of their accommodation option and whether they're going to cook on campus. So if they're eating on in the restaurants all the time, then maybe towards the higher end, sort of 10,000. If they're cooking maybe 5 or 6 times a week, then they can do that much cheaper. But yeah, between kind of 8,000 and 10,000 euros for the academic year, I think is plenty.
Now, the students that probably listening to this podcast, maybe they're looking or researching possibilities to apply in many different countries, one of which may well be the United States. And so students have this idea that there is financial aid available. Now, I know that's not always the case. Can you tell us if there's actually any financial aid available in Limerick?
So interestingly, we're actually recognized by the US Financial Aid Services. So for American students and Canadian students, they can access federal and financial aid coming to us. So FAFSA and all of those services are available. We're an accredited financial aid destination. We don't, however, offer, we can't, as a university, offer kind of financial aid or loans to international students. So we do have some students, particularly for master's degrees, that would access education loans from their home country and use that to pay for their fees in Ireland. And that's acceptable, but there's no financial aid service essentially provided by the Irish government or the Irish university to cover financial aid. But for US students actually coming to us, they can access financial aid through the usual measures.
I mean, in addition to financial aid, students are obviously looking to finance their studies. Are they able to work in Ireland, or are there any restrictions on non-Irish citizens working?
Yeah, so the international students can work part-time. So that's quite a common kind of way for students to cover their living costs. We say kind of you can cover the living expenses by working part-time. There is a time limit on the amount of hours that students can work. So that is 20 hours per week during semester. So normally students will work kind of either evenings or weekends. So our classes kind of run between 9 and 6, Monday to Friday. So outside of those hours are kind of free for part-time work. But we do obviously urge students to prioritize their studies. That's why they're here. So oftentimes they'll work kind of weekends or evening shifts is quite common. Outside of semester, so we have a break in around Christmas. So December, January time, we have a month break. And then we have a summer break for 3 months where students can remain in Ireland and work full-time, full-time during those months as well. So essentially the time limitation is, it's more a kind of it's a way to kind of make sure that they prioritize their studies, and then they can work part-time outside of the semester periods as well.
The sort of part-time jobs that students get, do they work on the campus? Do they work in the town, in the city?
Yeah, and as a student who went over to America, I knew that there was restrictions that we could only get part-time work in the campus. There's no such restrictions in Ireland. So students do work on campus. So there's, as I said, 19 restaurants. There's 5 or 6 shops. There's tutoring jobs. There's assisting with students with disabilities and taking note taking and stuff like that. But also a lot of our students will work in the city centre. So work in retail or work in restaurants or work in bars and nightclubs and stuff like that at weekends in the city centre as well. So that's quite common for our international students to do.
Okay, so we've just talked about money, and the other, of course, essential for international students is a study visa. Can you tell us what the procedures are for international students coming to Ireland?
Yeah, so there's quite a straightforward process essentially to apply for their student visa. So as long as a student has an offer from the university, we would provide that if they're successful, they can submit a student visa application. So some countries essentially it's submitted through the embassy, so the Embassy of Ireland in that country. Others, if there's not an embassy, essentially it comes to Dublin and is processed here in Ireland, but it's all submitted through the same route. Basically, they would submit their letter of offer, and then they would need to provide just some financial documents either from themselves or their parents, depending on their situation, just showing kind of being able to cover the cost of living and tuition and so on. And then once that's kind of all processed, essentially the student will get a student visa to arrive. And then the last step essentially is we will then arrange for them to do an immigration appointment once they're in Ireland. That's all managed by the university. They do that appointment and then they get their what we call Stamp 2 visa, which is a student visa. So they get a card, national identity card, with a Stamp 2 visa on that, kind of within a couple of weeks of arriving into Ireland. So reasonably straightforward. The only kind of difficult one is getting the financial statements and stuff like that from their parents. But there's quite clear guidelines provided in terms of what needs to be got on that.
Do students have to show English language proficiency in order to obtain a visa?
If they're coming from a non-English speaking country, and their language of tuition is not English, then they do need to provide that. So we accept IELTS, we accept OET, Duolingo, TOEFL, a wide range of tests for that. We can give a conditional offer letter before we see those English language proofs, but in order to finally travel, essentially they would need to get an IELTS or equivalent score basically to get that. So for their final approval for visa, they would need to have an English language proof if they're coming from a non-English speaking country.
Now, some countries allow students to stay on after they've graduated and work for usually a restricted number of years, possibly. Can international students stay on in Ireland?
Yeah, so we have something similar. So for bachelor degree graduates, essentially we have a 1-year stayback visa. For postgraduate graduates, we have a 2-year stayback visa. The way that we treat that essentially is it's kind of an opportunity to find longer term work, and then those companies are in a position to if they're open to it, they can then sponsor you for a work visa at that stage. Because we have the structure of our degree courses, so our 4-year bachelor degree courses have the 1-year work placement, or the 8-month, depending on the course, built into it. So the student actually gets professional work experience as part of their degree course. That doesn't affect their visa status, and then essentially, so they're earning money and building a professional profile during their bachelor degree. Then they graduate. Then they have 1 year to work in Ireland, and then after that first year after a bachelor's, they can then apply for a working visa, which they can apply for directly themselves, or they can ask a company to sponsor them for that longer duration stay. Then once they're working in Ireland full time. Once they're working here for 5 years, they can then apply for PR or permanent residency at that stage.
I see. So moving away from visas and back to the university, which is probably more interesting, I would imagine. When students are researching courses at different universities, clearly there is different content and different focus and different priorities. What would you say are the overall strengths of your university, which would attract students to go there?
I think we've covered some of these already. So very much the practical education and the student experience part. Those definitely are kind of universal strengths that overarch all of the faculties. We do have a couple of very, very strong programs and very interesting programs. So one of the kind of the most interesting courses that we've launched only this year is our immersive software engineering program. So it's a 4-year bachelor degree in the area of computer science and software engineering, but it essentially takes the process of teaching from medical schools and it applies it to computer science. So the students essentially do 6 residencies with large multinational tech companies in Ireland. So about 50% of their learning is actually on site in tech firms where they're paid for the residencies. And then 50% of it is on campus. So the students essentially do 4 years degree. Two of those years are structured residencies in companies where they're kind of learning the practical skills that they need. And then the other 2 years are usually just before they go in the placement, they're taught the skills on campus in Limerick. So that sort of style teaching is first of its kind in the world in computer science. And it's something that we've kind of trialed with companies like Stripe, payments provider, Facebook, Zalando, and some others. So that type of style of teaching definitely is something that is a strength for us. So students that want to get their hands dirty and get stuck in early, I think that's something that would be a strength for UL for sure.
I think students and parents in particular are always interested to know, where can I go on and work? What sort of careers are open to me if I am a graduate or if I will be a graduate from Limerick University? I mean, are there any typical career areas your students move into, or is it a very broad field of different careers that they tend to go on to?
So it's something, and where our careers division essentially is as you can imagine, it's very busy in our university with the I think it's the largest placement program in Europe, but they do quite a lot of work actually on mapping out student outcomes. So for all of our bachelor degree courses, obviously there's a website on the front page. So if it's Bachelor of Business Studies, essentially we will show what courses and what type of companies graduates have gone into. So it's kind of how long is a piece of string, because we have so many programs, but we do try and kind of show tangible outcomes from our courses in terms of what type of job title students have or graduates have and what companies they go into. We do see, and we actually track this because the work placements are so long in duration and are structured and supported by the university. About 70% of our students get a job offer back with their placement company. So not all of them accept that job offer, but they do get it's almost treated like a working interview essentially. So companies kind of build into their workforce. They build in these student employees. They usually kind of have them overlap. So they'll have like a month handover and a month handover at the end. So they'll have a UL student basically in a full-time equivalent, and basically it'll be a different person every 6 to 8 months, but they have a kind of a whole-time equivalent built in there. So the students that are in there, they're normally going into jobs that have a defined job description. They have a set of roles and responsibilities, that it's not just going in, making tea and coffee and making photocopies and, being an annoyance around the office.
Sure.
They're actually contributing on team projects, and it's something that they're graded on. They have to write a report on. They receive a grade, an academic grade that's quite highly weighted in terms of their overall degree. It's built into that as well. So our faculty members visit twice per placement and stuff like that. So that's all kind of tied together in terms of the graduate outcomes as well.
I think if I could add something on the more personal note, I mentioned that one of my sons studied in Ireland, and he actually did one of these placements. He was actually working at the Irish Health Ministry in Dublin, and I think it was enormously useful for him. It was really a fantastic experience to be able to do the academics and then also to have the work experience and placement.
Yep. And I as I said, I did my politics and international relations bachelor's. My work placement was in the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs. At the time, Ireland was the president of the European Union, and it was just as the expansion of the Eastern European 10 countries were added into Europe. I was added to the Eastern European desk, and essentially, I think week 6 or 7, I was sitting in Brussels representing Ireland in a meeting essentially. So I've been given a briefing, and so it's really kind of useful stuff in terms of practical and actionable.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you've got any questions, students or people who are listening, and they want to know more, maybe we haven't covered something in enough detail, who should they contact at your university?
Yeah, so if you contact the UL Global team, essentially, so we have, if you just search the UL website, there's the global team, or email ulglobal@ul.ie. That's probably the best point of contact. There's a whole host of information on our global website that clarifies entry requirements, visa requirements, and all that sort of stuff. So check out that site or contact the global team directly.
So thank you. And we always encourage students to have a sort of plan B or a plan C or even a plan D. If they don't get into your university, is there anywhere that you could recommend that they think about applying, somewhere that you value, maybe in Ireland or maybe elsewhere?
Yeah, so there's kind of a network of national universities in Ireland, and a lot of us would have quite strong similarities in terms of structure. So obviously we mentioned with Jeremy, Trinity College is the top ranked university in Ireland, and is a fantastic place to study in Dublin. My own personal recommendation would be the University of Galway. So they're a sister university of Limerick, and would have very, very strong similarities. Only about an hour away from Limerick as well. So you can pop down and meet me if you wanted to as well. And then there's a number of technological universities that are essentially smaller institutions that have just been amalgamated in the Irish system. So it's kind of a new development here in the Irish education system. So the University of the Shannon is the other main university here in Limerick City. So if you wanted to come to Limerick but don't get into UL, TUS essentially, so tus.ie is another really strong university and has the same kind of practical education approach as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Liam. It's been a great pleasure to learn about the university, your location, and yourself. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I think university sounds like a really wonderful option. So thank you. Wow, that was a real pleasure to meet Liam. It was a really interesting experience for me. I hadn't really thought about Ireland particularly as a destination, and certainly not about Limerick, but the university offers an awful lot, doesn't it?
It does indeed. And I was very impressed by the whole sort of feeling of community and the way they care for the students and really look after them very well. I think it was a very, very positive experience for me listening to what Liam had to say.
Indeed, and that course he was talking about, where the students are working in IT companies, sounds incredibly innovative, doesn't it?
And I think they do a very good job in organising placements, internships for their students, which is a huge advantage, really, because when students finally finish university, they need to go out and find a job. And if they've already had that experience as part of their university course, and then it's a big plus. And I think Limerick do an excellent job in that respect.
Right. So you'd recommend it, would you, to students?
Absolutely, yes, without hesitation.
Thanks so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and share the Find Your Best Future podcast.